Hello, I'm Robert Ellsberg. I'm the publisher of Orbis Books, and I have a great pleasure today to talk with one of our newest authors, Father Bill Cain, who is a Jesuit priest and a playwright. Some of you may be old fans, if you're old enough like me, from the 90s to remember the show that he produced, Nothing Sacred, that appeared for some while, that gave this very honest and affectionate and appealing picture of life inside a Catholic parish in Chicago. Maybe it was a little bit too appealing, so that certain Catholic conservatives protested and it disappeared. It was a great loss. But I would have been a fan even if it hadn't been a great show, because the producers approached us and they wanted to begin the opening credits by showing the bookshelf of this fictional priest, and it would have some Orbis books on the shelf, which would kind of be a wink to the audience, sophisticated audience, about what kind of a priest this was and what his sympathies were. And maybe those sympathies were what got the show canned. But now we jump ahead decades, and Father Cain has earned a legitimate place on the Orbis bookshelf for his own book, which is called The Diary of Jesus Christ. And I hope it will appear on the many bookshelves of not just fictional priests, inner city parish in Chicago, but a book I would highly recommend to anyone. It's called The Diary. It's not exactly diary entries. There's sort of short stories told through the voice of Jesus that kind of take you behind the scenes, to use that's a little movie or playwright kind of language there, to see these kind of stories from a different perspective, in which we're not watching Jesus, we're seeing Jesus reflect on his encounters with other people, sick people, poor people, his own family, his own followers, and we see a kind of a sense of his own growing into his mission and what he's called to be and who he is. I will just say very personally that when I read this for the first time, there was hardly a story in this that didn't leave me in tears. And I have to be careful about even describing some of them because I'll start bawling. But they're so moving, and you obviously bring a kind of playwright's eye to this when you're reading the Gospels, and kind of how would you translate this into something on the stage, perhaps? Can you say a little bit about how this book came about? Did you just find yourself writing these kind of stories and they began to add up, or over a long time, or was it a book that you planned?
First of all, thanks for the kind words about Nothing Sacred. That was a great adventure, and I'm glad Orbis was on the bookshelf.
Yes, that's right. It didn't cost you too much.
Well, also, Orbis may have gotten us canceled for.
Yeah, it could be. Sorry about that.
Very grateful to be part of Orbis and part of your collection. It's a great honor, and I'm very, very appreciative. The book was not planned as a book. It began as preaching. I had a very good friend. Ignatian meditation, Jesuit meditation, says, put yourself in the scripture, see yourself within the story. And I had a friend who did that brilliantly and used it for preaching. And if you're a good Jesuit, you become a minor character. I'm at best a mediocre Jesuit, maybe even a poor one. So I found myself trying to see the world through Jesus's eyes. And I began to preach that way. At first, a bit tentatively. The last story in the book, the story of the Ascension, was the first one I did on an Ascension Thursday. And it got an overwhelming response from the congregation. And what I realized was people have had the gospel explained to them for their entire lives. But to be invited, as Ignatius does, to be invited to be within the presence, to be within the mind, really literally to put on the mind, the heart, the soul of Jesus, is a rare opportunity. And so I began week by week to begin to preach that way. And the stories began to get longer. And the first time I realized I should start saving them is one of the congregation began to tape them. So that's very strange. but then it began to accumulate and a life of Christ began to emerge. And a personality and his mother and his family and the whole supporting cast began to emerge.
In a way, I didn't feel as if I was being transported into the first century so much as the gospel stories were being, kind of conveyed into our own immediate context. The people are all familiar. They seem like people you can understand, and you present their kind of inner psychology. I was, and of course, some of the stories are things that we don't find in the Gospels. For instance, about Jesus's childhood and his early life. Some of those were particularly moving to me. Kind of, we think a lot about the relation between Jesus and his mother, but often, well, I don't want to give away too much, but for instance, there's a scene where Jesus goes into the marketplace and he's reciting the song he learned from his mother, the Magnificat, and a Roman soldier grabs him and says, "Tell me who taught you that song? Who wrote that song?" And it's the first time he kind of realizes that this is a subversive, sort of message. And I don't know if that's the one where he goes back and says to his mother, "Who are you?"
It is. Because the Roman soldier hears him, he's trying to raise money.
Mm-hmm.
He has this conundrum. Does he have when people are poor, does he have a right to eat?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes out and he performs the Magnificat and sings it, and he begins to make some money from it. And the soldier picks him up, puts him up against a wall, and says, "Who's behind this song? Give us his name, because this man is trying to bring down the Roman Empire." This shocks him into a new image of his mother, and he goes back and says, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to destroy Rome? And then finally he says, "Are you the Messiah?"
Yeah, right.
As he tries to find out. And Mary in these stories is a very practical woman, very nonsense. And she says, no matter how old you get, you'll never cease to be my son. And sings him to sleep.
Singing that song, revolutionary song. There was also a beautiful exchange when he comes back from the desert, where he was, an angel ministered to him, and he begins to describe this conversation he had with the angel. And I love the way you say that he heard it not like words, but it was like music, like musical instruments playing. And he says, and Mary's very interested in listening to his story. What did he say next? What did the angel say then? What did you say to him? And finally, the angel says, "Say hello to your mother for me."
Because they kept in this version, Mary and Joseph kept the angels from the boy because they didn't want to confuse him too badly. They kept a number of things from him. So when the angel finally appears to him, what do you have? What she says? What did the angel say? And he said, "Give my love to your mother."
Yeah,
said,
right.
Did you speak with an angel? And she says, "What did the angel say?"
Yeah.
The series of questions, but the angel is surprised because the angel says, "Your mother's a very surprising woman."
Yeah, right.
When an angel appears, you say something and the person is too overawed to speak. But I said she was going to be the mother of the Messiah. And she said, "How?"
Yeah.
I said, I'm not sure I'm prepared to answer that question. She said, "Well, sit down at the kitchen table and we will work this out."
Yeah. Yeah.
That's Mary.
And the angel sort of said, I wondered whether she was really this young girl was really the one for this job, but it turns out that she's a much better teacher than I could have been for you. It was very moving. Now, women play a big role in this story.
Very
And
much.
for me, the most moving encounter maybe in the whole book was with the relationship with Mary Magdalene, and the story where Jesus names the 12 followers, his 12 disciples. And Mary Magdalene, even though she knew he was going to name these, she helped him pick them out, apparently. She feels surprised, in fact, by how hurt she is that she's not included in one of those. And Jesus is confused because, well, we talked it all through and everything. And it represents some, tension in their relationship. It's one of those moments in the book where I felt that in imagining your way into these stories of Jesus, of course, Jesus is holding up a kind of mirror to the church today and issues that we're still talking about.
And very much so. I mean, my understanding of Mary Magdalene is very much influenced by the women that I've worked with in ministry. And a lot of these homilies were preached in the Mary Magdalene Chapel at Xavier Parish in New York.
Mhm.
But Mary Magdalene is sitting there hearing, or she's just called Magdalene in the book. She's sitting and she's hearing these names called one after the other. And suddenly she realizes that she's yearning for her name to be called, which
Mhm.
hadn't occurred to her before.
Mhm.
So it opens this gulf between the two of them, which
Mhm.
gets healed over time.
Yeah.
But it is a gulf. It's a problem. It's still a problem.
One of the really poignant moments there was where she says, "These are all good men. I recognize that, but and you've made it clear that Mary understands what's going to happen to Jesus. That's something that not everybody else understands, but she understands where this is all heading." And she says, "These men are not going to be with you to the end, but I'll be there." Uh, one of those moments for me.
Yeah, I'm having that too, because she says, I wish I had it in front of me, but she says, if it comes to death, the men will not be there. I know men.
Yeah,
They won't be there, but I will be there.
yeah,
And Joshua, Jesus in the book, says to her, well, if it comes to that, if it comes to death, I will find you.
yeah, yeah.
I promise you that beyond death. And
Yeah.
then that builds to finally, in terms of the resurrection, it,
Mhm.
in this construction, could not have even begun to happen without Magdalene.
Yeah, yeah. The another really poignant one was the story of Lazarus, and I won't tell the whole kind of construction that you put on the back of the relationship that they've had going their lives but when Jesus calls him out of the tomb and uh, and nothing happens originally, but then the sisters join in, and then Lazarus's wife, whom you've imagined, finally they have issues in their relationship, calls him out, and then he comes, and Jesus says, to the others, when my time comes, I want you to call me out. That was it's not really a question. It's just I thought it was great.
Are you being touched by that as you describe it?
Oh yeah, no, this is not put on.
No, no, but through Zoom, it's a little hard to tell.
Yes.
I'm glad you feel that way, because I have mixed feelings about the Lazarus stories.
Oh really? Huh?
So that's very heartening for me that you feel that. But I think a lot of the way we think of Jesus is very theoretically or
Mhm.
stuck in Renaissance paintings
Yes.
or stuck in archaic language. But
Mhm.
I think one thing that these stories do is they put you in the presence. They put your heart in the presence of Jesus,
Mhm.
and they can be right or they can be wrong,
Yeah.
but somehow they open a space,
Yes.
and that one can enter that space and have one's own experience. Um, so it's been a wonderful
Yeah.
gift to me.
Because yeah, obviously, I mean, I think glad you said that, because it's not like, well, this is the way it really was, or
Yeah,
these are the correct versions. But I think when you think about how the impact that Jesus had on people,
yeah,
and how people's lives were changed, how it troubled them, how it had put them on a different direction, how they changed course, how they always remembered this encounter that they had with this healer or this teacher or whatever. He must have been, just an extraordinary personality. And I think that's what's so effective in stories here, is that whether or not this is the way it really happened, or Jesus had this kind of relationship with Mary Magdalene or Lazarus or whatever, it speaks to our hearts,
yeah,
and a feel in that sense, you have a sense of feeling that kind of mysterious and sacred energy that comes from Jesus, and changes our hearts, changes our lives. That's what I took away from this. And when you take that, then you can go back and read the Gospels I think in a different way. And I think so many efforts of reform or renewal in the church have really come from re-encountering Jesus again. St. Francis or St. Ignatius or liberation theology or whatever it is. That Jesus kind of holds up this sort of mirror to us, mirror to the church, and we can kind of look in that and see whether we see our reflection or not, what that's calling us to. And I really had the feeling that this is a picture of Jesus that Pope Francis would really appreciate. is a Jesus who is as a companion, is somebody who could be a friend. So we wouldn't have to be afraid of him. We could sit down. We could share what's in our hearts. He would understand. We could talk about it. And that he ultimately he's not coming to teach theology, but how to kind of how to receive the love of God and reflect that back to our neighbors.
And also, I agree entirely, and I'm glad that you're so sympathetic to it. I feel very, very lucky. But also, I think that companionship with Christ is an invitation to intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an intimacy to this version of Jesus, to Joshua, where when he starts to meet someone or someone starts to get to know him, the infinite happens between people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what prayer is, and I think that's what spirituality finally is.
Mm-hmm.
Invitation to our deepest self. And I think that's what Jesus was always doing. And it works both ways, because the people he meets do that for him. They wake him up all of the time. So it's a two-way street. But I think intimacy and a real passion for one another is part of what he was that sometimes gets lost. This book kind of lands on that.
Well, I would love to see this as a TV show. If you could have an episode every week, and I think this Jesus would have more than one Orbis book on his bookshelf, at least.
I know that. Whatsoever.
And I'm very glad that through your book he has a place on our bookshelf. And thank you very much, Father Cain. And it's really been a pleasure talking with you.
I'm honored, and it's a privilege. It's a privilege to talk to somebody who's been touched, because these have all been. You're the first person really who's read the book. It's always been personal, and it's nice to know that in a printed form, it still has that intimacy.
Oh, totally. I would love to hear you read them aloud. I wish we had time to do that, but maybe find some way of doing that. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. Take care.